88 million people live in a country that was Persia for over 2,500 years before becoming the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. With a revolution that transformed the region and created a nation that exists in the Western imagination primarily through sanctions, nuclear negotiations, and political tensions that obscure a civilization older than most European nations. This is the country that gave the world the first declaration of human rights under Cyrus the Great. He invented the postal system and the concept of paradise gardens, and built an empire that stretched from India to Greece, while tolerating religious diversity in ways that would shame most contemporary nations. The architecture is extraordinary, with turquoise-tiled mosques and Achaemenid ruins demonstrating aesthetic achievement across millennia. The hospitality is genuine, with strangers inviting you to tea and insisting on paying for your meal. Despite economic hardships created by sanctions that have made daily life difficult. Yet Iran is also a theocracy, enforcing strict Islamic codes, a government suppressing dissent, and a society where women's rights remain contested and political prisoners languish in Evin prison. The capital contains 15 million people in a sprawling metropolitan area that extends from the Alborz Mountains in the north to the desert plains in the south, with the elevation difference creating distinct microclimates and socio-economic zones, where wealth concentrates in the cooler northern districts, while working-class neighborhoods occupy the hotter south. The city is smog when thermal inversions trap pollution between the mountains and create air quality so poor that schools close and the government orders reduced industrial activity. The Azadi Tower is the symbol of the city, built in 1971 to commemorate the 2500th anniversary of the Persian Empire under the Shah, and later becoming the rallying point for the 1979 revolution. The National Museum displays artifacts from across Iranian history with Achaemenid gold work, Sasanian silver plates, and Islamic ceramics demonstrating the civilization's continuity despite conquests and regime changes. Tehran is chaotic, polluted, and exhausting, yet it is where contemporary Iran happens. The palace complex in Tehran was the residence of the Qajar dynasty that ruled Iran from 1789 to 1925. with the buildings and gardens demonstrating the synthesis of Persian architecture with European influences that characterized the late Qajar period. The Marble Throne Hall contains a throne carved from the yellow marble that was used for coronations, including the crowning of Reza Shah in 1925, marking the end of Qajar rule and the beginning of the Pahlavi dynasty. The Hall of Mirrors is covered entirely in mirrored glass and plasterwork, creating reflections that multiply infinitely and demonstrate the craftsman's skill at creating surfaces that shimmer with light. Thus, the palace is UNESCO listed, with the complex being one of the few remaining examples of Qajar-era royal architecture in Tehran, as most other palaces were destroyed or repurposed after the 1979 revolution. The palace represents the monarchy that the revolution overthrew, preserved now as heritage despite the political complications. The city in central Iran was the capital of the Safavid Empire under Shah Abbas I, who transformed it into one of the world's most beautiful cities in the early 17th century, with mosques, palaces, bridges, and gardens that remain spectacular 4 centuries later. The saying, "Isfahan is half the world," reflects the city's historical importance and its aesthetic achievement. With the Naqsh-e Jahan Square being the heart of this splendor. The Persepolis Bridge, with its 33 arches, crosses the Zayandeh River. Providing a gathering place where locals sit on the stone terraces in the evenings, when the arches are illuminated and the river reflects the lights. The Armenian quarter of Jolfa contains the Vank Cathedral, where the Christian minority maintained by the Safavids built a church that combines Persian architectural elements with Christian iconography in frescoes that cover every surface. Isfahan rewards slow exploration, with the beauty being not just in the famous monuments, but in the details of everyday streets. The square in Isfahan is one of the largest public squares in the world, covering over 8 hectares and surrounded by 2-story arcades containing shops that have operated continuously since the square was built in the early 17th century. The square was designed by Shah Abbas I as the center of his new capital, with the Shah Mosque on the south side. And the Sheikh Lotfullah Mosque on the east, and the Ali Kappu Palace on the west, creating a composition that demonstrates Safavid urban planning and architectural achievement. The square is UNESCO listed with the inscription recognizing both the individual monuments and the square as an integrated urban space where royal, religious, and commercial functions coexist. The square remains a gathering place, with families picnicking on the grass in the evenings and children playing football, despite the historical significance of the space. The square represents Persian civilization at its peak, when Isfahan rivaled any European capital. The mosque on the south side of Naqsh-e Jahan Square is the architectural masterpiece of the Safavid period. With the entrance portal rising 27 meters and covered in tile work that demonstrates the pinnacle of Persian ceramic art. The mosque is oriented toward Mecca, requiring the architect to angle the prayer hall relative to the square. With the transition being accomplished through a corridor that turns gradually, so visitors do not notice the shift in axis until they emerge into the courtyard. At the dome rises 52 meters and is covered in turquoise and dark blue tiles in patterns that include calligraphy, geometric designs, and floral motifs, with the tile work being so intricate that it appears to be painted rather than assembled from individual ceramic pieces. The acoustics in the dome chamber create echoes that repeat 7 times when you stand on the marked stone beneath the center, with the effect being designed to amplify the voice of the Imam leading prayers. The mosque represents Persian Islamic architecture at its most refined. The mosque on the east side of Naqsh-e Jahan Square was built as a private mosque for the royal court. With no minarets and no courtyard, only a prayer hall covered by a dome that displays some of the finest tile work in Iran. The entrance corridor turns to orient the hall toward Mecca. With the walls being covered in tile work that creates patterns so complex that they appear almost three-dimensional in the changing light. The dome's interior changes color throughout the day as sunlight enters through the windows. With the tiles reflecting light in shades of cream, gold, and pink, depending on the angle and intensity of illumination. The mosque demonstrates the Safavid aesthetic, refined to its essence. With decoration covering every surface but being executed with such skill that the effect is harmony rather than excess. The mosque is smaller than the Shah Mosque, but many consider it more beautiful for the intimacy and the quality of the craftsmanship. The city in southern Iran has been celebrated in Persian poetry for over 1,000 years. With Hafez and Saadi being buried in gardens that remain pilgrimage sites where Iranians come to read poetry and remember the cultural achievements that define Persian identity beyond politics and religion. The Nasir al-Mulk Mosque fills with colored light in the mornings when sun shines through stained glass windows onto carpets and columns, creating an interior that glows in shades of pink, blue, and orange. The Erem Garden is a UNESCO-listed Persian garden with cypress trees, rose gardens, and a mansion that demonstrates the Qajar interpretation of the paradise garden concept that Persians perfected over centuries. Shiraz is pleasant with tree-lined streets and a climate moderated by elevation that makes it more comfortable than the desert cities to the north and east. The city represents Persian culture at its most refined, with poetry, gardens, and beauty being valued above wealth or power. The ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire was built by Darius I, and his successors from 518 BCE onward on a terrace carved from the mountainside with palaces, audience halls, and gates demonstrating the empire's power and the artistic achievement of the civilization that ruled from India to the Aegean. The site was burned by Alexander the Great in 330 BCE in an act that Persians still resent as cultural vandalism. With the stone structures surviving, while the cedar roofs were consumed by flames that destroyed the city in a single night. The Apadana Palace staircase is covered in relief carvings showing delegations from across the empire bringing tribute to the king. With each group being depicted in their distinctive clothing and carrying gifts specific to their region, creating a visual record of the empire's diversity. The site is UNESCO listed with the ruins demonstrating the scale and sophistication of Achaemenid architecture. The columns still standing 40 meters apart, showing the engineering required to roof such spans. Persepolis is Persian identity in stone, predating Islam by 1,000 years. The mosque in Shiraz is famous internationally for the photographs taken in the prayer hall. When morning sunlight passes through stained glass windows and creates pools of colored light on the floor and columns, with the effect being genuinely spectacular for the hour or two when the sun is at the correct angle. The mosque was built in the late 19th century during the Qajar period. With the pink tiles on the exterior giving it the nickname that has made it famous among tourists and photographers. The interior combines traditional Persian architectural elements with Victorian-era stained glass. That was fashionable when the mosque was constructed, creating a hybrid style that is uniquely Qajar. The mosque has become perhaps the most photographed location in Iran, with the crowds arriving before dawn to capture the light, making it difficult to experience the space with any sense of contemplation. The mosque represents Persian aesthetic sensibility translated into Islamic architecture. With beauty being pursued through color and light. The desert city in central Iran has been continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years. With the adobe architecture and the wind towers creating a cityscape adapted to extreme desert conditions, where summer temperatures exceed 45 degrees Celsius. The old city is a maze of narrow lanes enclosed by adobe walls, with the lanes being deliberately narrow and winding to provide shade and to channel the prevailing winds through the residential areas. The wind towers, or badges, capture wind and direct it down into the houses, and creating natural ventilation that cools the interiors even during the hottest months. The technology being ancient but effective enough that some modern buildings in Yazd still use the principle. The Zoroastrian fire temple contains a flame that has been burning continuously for over 1,500 years, according to tradition. With Yazd being home to one of the world's largest remaining Zoroastrian communities maintaining practices from the pre-Islamic period. In Yazd is architectural heritage preserved not in museums, but in daily life. With residents still inhabiting the adobe houses. The mosque in Yazd features the tallest minarets in Iran at 52 meters, with the twin towers flanking the entrance portal and visible across the city from any elevated position. The mosque was built in the 14th century on the site of earlier structures. and with the current building demonstrating Ilkhanid period architecture and tile work that covers the portal and the dome in geometric and calligraphic patterns. The entrance portal reaches 48 meters in height and is decorated entirely in tile work, featuring Quranic verses in Kufic script surrounded by floral and geometric designs in shades of blue and turquoise. The mosque demonstrates the architectural traditions of Desert Iran, here with the adobe construction being covered in tile to protect it from erosion while providing decoration that makes the structure visible across the flat landscape. The mosque remains an active place of worship, while also being recognized as one of the finest examples of medieval Persian religious architecture. The complex in Yazd contains a mosque, a caravanserai, a bathhouse, a cold water well, and a confectionery arranged around a plaza dominated by a three-story facade with recessed alcoves that create dramatic shadows and provide one of the most photographed views in the city. The facade was built in the 15th century as part of a larger complex, with the symmetry and the scale being designed to create an impressive entrance to the commercial area behind. The complex is illuminated at night, with the lights in the alcoves emphasizing the architecture's depth and creating an effect that is genuinely beautiful when seen across the plaza. The complex demonstrates the integration of religious, commercial, and civic functions in traditional Persian urban planning, with the various structures serving the community's needs within a single architectural composition. The complex remains active, with shops operating in the caravanserai and the mosque being used for prayers, in making it a living heritage rather than preserved monument. The city in southeastern Iran is the capital of Kerman province and a gateway to the Dasht-e Lut Desert. With the city's economy historically based on carpet production and the trade routes connecting Iran to Pakistan and Afghanistan. The Ganjali Khan complex in the city center is a Safavid-era ensemble of buildings including a bathhouse, a caravanserai, a mosque, and a bazaar arranged around a square. With the bathhouse now being a museum, displaying wax figures in traditional scenes of bathing and relaxation. The city suffered from devastating earthquakes, including one in 2003 that destroyed the nearby city of Bam and killed over 25,000 people. With the seismic risk being an ongoing concern in a region where tectonic activity is frequent and unpredictable. Kerman serves as a base for visiting the Shazdeh Garden and for desert expeditions into the Lut. With the city itself being pleasant, but not remarkable beyond its function as regional center and departure point for more dramatic destinations. The garden near Mahan outside Kerman is a UNESCO-listed Persian paradise garden built in the late 19th century for a Qajar prince. With the garden being laid out in terraces that descend the hillside with water channels, fountains, and cypress trees creating an oasis in the desert landscape. The garden demonstrates the Persian concept of paradise as a walled garden, where water, shade, and cultivation create an idealized space separate from the harsh environment outside. With the contrast between the green garden and the brown desert being deliberately emphasized by the location. The garden is entered through a gate that provides no view of the interior, with the layout being designed so that visitors pass through the entrance and suddenly see the full length of the garden extending ahead with water flowing down channels between the cypress trees. The garden represents the Persian garden tradition at its most developed, with every element being placed according to principles refined over centuries to create beauty through the careful arrangement of water, plants, and architecture. The city between Tehran and Isfahan is known for its traditional houses with interior courtyards, wind towers, and underground chambers that provide natural cooling in a climate where summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees. The Tabatabai House and the Borujerdi House are two of the finest examples, with both being open to visitors and displaying the craftsmanship of the merchants who built them in the 19th century using wealth generated by trade. The houses are designed around courtyards, with pools and gardens that provide light and ventilation to the surrounding rooms, while the wind towers capture the prevailing breeze and direct it down into the underground chambers where the temperature remains cool even during the hottest months. The Aga Bozorg Mosque combines a mosque and a theological school around a sunken courtyard garden, with the symmetry and the proportions being carefully calculated to create harmony. Kashan rewards visitors interested in traditional Persian architecture and urban planning, with the houses and the bazaar demonstrating how Iranians adapted to desert conditions through architectural innovation. The garden in Kashan is one of the oldest surviving Persian gardens, with the current layout dating to the Safavid period, though gardens have existed on this site for over 1,000 years. Fed by a natural spring that provides constant water regardless of the desert climate. The garden is laid out according to the Chahar Bagh or four-garden plan, with water channels dividing the space into quadrants that represent the four rivers of paradise described in Islamic tradition. Though the garden concept predates Islam and has Zoroastrian origins. The garden contains the bathhouse, where Amir Kabir, the reforming prime minister of the Qajar period, was assassinated in 1852 on the orders of the Shah he had served. With the bathhouse now being a museum displaying the events. The garden is UNESCO listed as one of the 9 Persian gardens recognized for their historical and cultural significance, with the inscription acknowledging the gardens as expressions of Persian civilization's aesthetic and philosophical values. The garden demonstrates that beauty in Persian culture is not decoration, but an essential expression of civilizational identity. The desert near Isfahan offers sand dunes, a seasonal salt lake, and the opportunity to experience the desert landscape without the multi-day expeditions required to reach the Dasht-e Lut or the Maranjab. The dunes change shape with the wind, with the ripples and the crests creating patterns that are most dramatic at sunrise and sunset when the low-angle light emphasizes the texture. The village of Varzaneh, at the edge of the desert, is known for women wearing white chadors instead of the black that is standard elsewhere in Iran, with the tradition being specific to this region and maintained despite pressure to conform to national norms. The Gavkuni wetland nearby is a seasonal lake that fills during wet years and provides habitat for migratory birds. Though dam construction and agricultural water use have reduced the inflow to the point where the wetland is often dry, even in years with normal rainfall. The desert is accessible as a day trip from Isfahan, making it convenient for those wanting desert experience without extended travel. The island in the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's largest island, with a landscape of eroded rock formations, mangrove forests, beaches, and villages where traditional lifestyles persist despite the economic development transforming the mainland. The island is a free trade zone, with the designation bringing commercial activity and development while creating economic conditions different from the rest of Iran, including more relaxed enforcement of some regulations. The Stars Valley and Chaku Canyon are geological formations where erosion has carved the soft rock into shapes that appear almost architectural in their regularity. With the canyons providing shade and the cliffs creating dramatic vertical relief in a landscape that is otherwise flat. And the island's location in the strait makes it strategically significant. With Iranian military installations being visible alongside the tourism infrastructure that has developed to serve domestic tourists from the mainland. The island represents Iran's Gulf Coast, culturally distinct from the interior highlands and historically connected to trade networks reaching to India and East Africa. The island in the Strait of Hormuz is famous for its colored soils, with the rocks and the beaches displaying shades of red, yellow, white, and purple due to the mineral content and the oxidation of iron and other elements in the volcanic and sedimentary rocks. The island was historically a Portuguese fort from 1515 to 1622, with the ruins still visible on the coast and demonstrating the strategic importance of controlling the strait that connects the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean. The island's population is small, with most residents being involved in fishing or in the developing tourism industry that brings domestic visitors to see the colored soils and the beaches. The island is accessible by ferry from Bandar Abbas on the mainland, with the crossing taking about 30 minutes. And the island being small enough to explore in a day, though overnight stays are possible in basic guest houses. Hormuz represents Iran's maritime heritage, with the island being part of the trade and military networks that connected the Persian Gulf to the wider world. The bazaar in Tabriz is one of the oldest and largest covered markets in the world, with the current structure dating primarily from the 15th century, though commercial activity on this site extends back over 1,000 years. At the bazaar is UNESCO, listed for its architectural significance and for its role in facilitating trade along the Silk Road, with the complex containing over 7,000 shops, 24 caravanserais, and numerous mosques and bathhouses integrated into the commercial structure. The bazaar is organized into sections specializing in different goods, with the carpet bazaar, the gold bazaar, the spice section, and the copper workshops being among the most significant, and each being located in specific areas according to tradition. The bazaar is not a tourist attraction, but a functioning commercial center where locals shop for everyday needs and wholesalers trade goods being distributed across the region, making it a genuine part of the city's economic life rather than a preserved monument. The bazaar represents Persian commercial culture, with the architectural splendor serving practical functions rather than being purely decorative. The stratovolcano rises 5,610 meters, making it the highest peak in Iran and the highest volcano in Asia. All with the snow-covered summit being visible from Tehran on clear days, though air pollution usually obscures the view except in winter. The mountain is dormant but not extinct, with fumaroles near the summit releasing sulfurous gases that indicate the magma chamber beneath remains active, though the last confirmed eruption was approximately 7,000 years ago. The mountain appears in Persian mythology and literature as the prison where the tyrant Zahak was chained by the hero Feridan. With the myth being part of the Shahnameh epic that defines Persian cultural identity. The climb to the summit is technically straightforward, but physically demanding due to the altitude. With most climbers taking 3 days to ascend from the base camp at the Polua route. Though acclimatization is essential to avoid altitude sickness that can be severe or fatal. Damavand represents Persian national identity in mountain form, with the peak being a symbol that transcends political divisions. The castle in the Alborz Mountains was the stronghold of the Nizari Ismaili sect, known in European sources as the Assassins. With the fortress being occupied from 1090 until 1256, when the Mongols captured it and destroyed the library that allegedly contained Ismaili texts and scientific works. The castle is in ruins now, with only foundations remaining on the rocky outcrop that rises from the valley. Though the location demonstrates the strategic significance, with views commanding the approaches from every direction. The hike to the castle takes approximately 2 hours from the village below, with the trail being steep and exposed in sections, but manageable for anyone with reasonable fitness and proper footwear. The assassin's legend of killing political enemies through stealth rather than open warfare created a reputation that outlasted the sect itself. Though much of what Westerners believe about the assassins is fabrication or misunderstanding based on accounts by their enemies. The castle represents medieval Islamic history beyond the Sunni-Shia divide that dominates contemporary understanding. The desert in southeastern Iran contains some of the hottest places on Earth, with satellite measurements recording ground temperatures exceeding 70 degrees Celsius. In the dark volcanic rock areas that absorb and radiate heat without the moderating effects of vegetation or water. The desert is UNESCO listed for its geological diversity, including sand dunes reaching over 300 meters in height, yardangs carved by wind erosion into ridges that extend for kilometers, and the Gandham-Berrian Plateau, where the dark surface creates the extreme temperatures. The desert is largely uninhabited, with access requiring four-wheel drive vehicles and local knowledge to navigate safely. With the isolation and the harsh conditions making it genuinely dangerous for those unprepared for desert travel, where help is days away and mistakes can be fatal. The desert represents the extreme environments that exist within Iran, with the temperatures and the aridity creating conditions that challenge human survival, even with modern equipment and transportation. The ziggurat in Khuzestan province was built by the Elamite king Untitled in the 13th century BCE as a temple complex dedicated to the god in Shushanak. With the structure being one of the few surviving ziggurats outside Mesopotamia. The ziggurat originally rose approximately 53 meters in 5 levels. And though only 2.5 levels survive after 3,000 years of erosion and damage from wars, including the Iran-Iraq War, when the site was near the front lines. The site is UNESCO listed, with the ziggurat being recognized as an exceptional example of Elamite architecture and for demonstrating the cultural connections between Elam and Mesopotamia during the 2nd millennium BCE. The ziggurat is accessible from Avaz or Shush, with the drive requiring crossing flat plains where summer temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius, and where the Iran-Iraq War left unexploded ordnance that makes straying from marked roads dangerous. The ziggurat represents Iranian civilization's pre-Persian heritage, with the Elamites being indigenous to the region before the Aryans arrived and established the kingdoms that became Persia. The archaeological site contains the tomb of Cyrus the Great, who founded the Achaemenid Empire and created the first Persian state that unified the Iranian plateau and conquered Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Egypt. In campaigns between 559 and 530 BCE. The tomb is a simple stone structure with a gabled roof sitting on a 6-stepped platform. With the design being austere compared to the later Achaemenid monuments at Persepolis, but appropriate for a leader whose reputation was built on military achievement and administrative innovation rather than architectural excess. The site also contains the remains of 2 palaces with stone column bases and carved reliefs showing the transition from Median to Persian architectural styles, but with the craftsmanship being excellent, but the scale being modest compared to Persepolis, built by Cyrus's successors. The site is UNESCO listed with the inscription recognizing Pasargadae as the first capital of the Achaemenid Empire, and for the tomb being one of the most important monuments of ancient Persian civilization. Pasargadae represents the empire's founding, before the wealth and power created the monumental architecture that came later. Yet Iran is 88 million people living under a theocracy that controls what they wear, what they drink, and who they love, yet cannot control the pride they take in a civilization that was old when Rome was founded. The architecture is spectacular, with turquoise domes and ancient ruins demonstrating aesthetic achievement across millennia. The hospitality is genuine, with strangers insisting on tea despite economic hardships. Yet Iran is also repression, censorship, and the knowledge that speaking openly can mean prison. Beauty coexists with authoritarianism. The ancient civilization persists under a revolutionary regime. The warmth of the people contradicts the coldness of politics. "35 locations across Iran, from Tehran to the Lut Desert, from Persepolis to pink mosques. All beautiful, all complicated, all genuinely Persian, despite what the regime claims to represent.